What if the legends weren't just stories, but warnings? What if an entire family, across generations, wasn't merely evil, but something far, far worse? My name is Ethan Hayes, and for over 2 decades, I've delved into the forgotten corners of American history, specializing in the elusive, often unsettling narratives of Appalachia. I started as a genealogist, tracing bloodlines and forgotten settlements, but my work soon led me down paths that conventional historians refuse to tread. It started with whispers, fragments of county records, and an unusual number of abandoned homesteads in a region of eastern Tennessee once known as Shadow Creek Valley. The deeper I dug, the more I found references to a single pervasive name, the Thorne family. Their story, what I was able to piece together, isn't just one of the deadliest Appalachian families you won't believe existed. It's a terrifying testament to human malleability and the chilling possibility of an orchestrated evolution that none of us could ever truly comprehend. The Thornes first appeared in Shadow Creek Valley in 1883, during a winter so brutal it drove most other settlers to the brink of starvation. My initial research revealed no prior records of their existence, no birth certificates, no land deeds from other counties, no mention in any census or church registry before that year. It was as if Elias Thorne, the family patriarch, and his wife Alara, along with their 3 young children, Silas, Bethany, and Malachi, simply materialized from the snow-choked ridges themselves. Unlike other mountain folks, they arrived with no discernible possessions, no loaded wagons, no livestock. Yet they possessed an almost supernatural understanding of the land's hidden resources, and a disturbing foresight into the exact moment their new neighbors would collapse under the weight of their own desperation. Elias Thorne was a gaunt man, with eyes the color of river stones after a rain, flat and ancient. He had an unsettling habit of speaking in a soft, melodic drawl that could lull you into a false sense of security, making you believe he understood your deepest fears before you even voiced them. And he always seemed to know when tragedy was about to strike a homestead. When the Miller family's only cow broke its leg, Elias appeared with a splint and healing poultices even before young Thomas Miller had managed to hobble back from the pasture for help. When blight threatened the Henderson crops, Alara, with her unnerving, ethereal beauty, arrived carrying sacks of robust seeds, enough to save their harvest, asking for nothing but understanding in return. These acts, which the valley residents soon called Thorne's Providence, established the family as indispensable figures not just to be respected, but revered in the isolated community. But as I sifted through fragmented diaries and hushed oral histories collected by a university folklorist in the 1960s, a far more sinister reality emerged. What appeared to be uncanny intuition was, in fact, the result of meticulous observation and insidious, deliberate sabotage. The Thornes had spent months, perhaps even years, before their arrival in the valley, studying every family's routines, mapping their vulnerabilities, and then, with chilling precision, engineering the very emergencies they would later solve. The Miller cow's leg wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate act, the animal's pasture fence subtly weakened at a critical point by Malachi, the youngest Thorne son, who moved through the dense woods like a shadow. The Henderson blight wasn't a natural disaster. It was the result of contaminated seeds Elias had provided the previous spring, mixed with just enough healthy grain to avoid immediate suspicion. A calculated risk that paid off in absolute dependency. The Thorne compound, built with labor offered by grateful, now indebted, community members, was an imposing structure. It sat on a plateau, a natural amphitheater where 3 hollows converged, overlooking the entire valley like a silent, ever-watching eye. But it was more than just a home. It was a fortress and an observatory. From its distinctive tower, the Thornes, using crude but effective field glasses, meticulously monitored every family's daily activities. They noted when men left for hunting trips, when women traveled to neighboring settlements, when children wandered beyond parental supervision. This intelligence network allowed them to orchestrate their interventions with remarkable, chilling precision, gradually positioning themselves as the valley's unofficial protectors while simultaneously engineering the very threats they claimed to guard against. By 1895, the Thornes had achieved something unprecedented in Appalachian social structure: complete, unquestioning dependence. Every family in Shadow Creek Valley owed them debts that could never be repaid, favors that created unbreakable obligations, and a gratitude that masked a growing, unspoken terror. The few families who attempted to leave quickly discovered that their debts followed them. The Wilkins family's attempt to relocate to Knoxville in 1898 became a cautionary tale that echoed through the valley for decades. After loading their possessions and announcing their intention to depart, they made it barely 10 miles before their wagon mysteriously broke down. When they sought help at a nearby settlement, they were met not with sympathy, but with suspicion. Samuel Thorne had already arrived hours before them to collect on debts the Wilkins swore they never incurred. Documents bearing their signatures, in handwriting they swore wasn't theirs, detailed loans for emergency medical care, borrowed livestock, and protection services stretching back years. More disturbing were the testimonials from residents of that distant settlement, people who had never met the Wilkins family, claiming they had stolen tools, spoiled wells, and even threatened children. They spoke with conviction, describing specific incidents they claimed to have witnessed. The Wilkins family, utterly broken, returned to Shadow Creek Valley that same evening. Neighbors noted that they moved and spoke differently afterward, as though something essential, something vital, had been drained from them. Elia's children, now adults, each specialized in different, equally insidious aspects of their family's control system. Silas, the eldest, managed what they euphemistically called education services. He established a school that ostensibly provided children with basic literacy, but in reality, it served as a sophisticated indoctrination program. Children who attended his classes returned home not just with reading skills, but with extensive knowledge of their neighbors' private conversations, family secrets, and hidden resources. Silas subtly cultivated a network of juvenile informants that penetrated every household in the valley, teaching them to report disruptive thoughts or uncooperative behaviors as part of their community service. Bethany, the middle child and only daughter, oversaw community wellness. She organized patrols that supposedly guarded against external threats while actually monitoring residents' compliance with increasingly arbitrary rules. Her men, always silent and watchful, carried weapons and wore crude uniforms that gave them an official appearance, though they answered to no legitimate authority beyond the Thorns. These patrols conducted regular searches of homes under the pretense of security inspections, confiscating items deemed dangerous or unnecessary, gradually stripping families of their independence and their ability to resist. Bethany also developed a reputation as a healer, though her treatments often left patients with a profound emotional dependence, making conventional medicine ineffective afterward. Her touch, locals whispered, could mend a broken bone, but also break a man's spirit. Malachi, the youngest son, managed spiritual guidance. He established religious services that blended traditional mountain Christianity with practices that seemed designed to break down individual will. His sermons emphasized themes of absolute submission, collective responsibility, and the grave dangers of independent thought. He introduced rituals involving group confessions, where residents were encouraged to reveal their private doubts and fears. Information that was meticulously documented and later used by the family to manipulate and control them. These services, held in a specially constructed chapel at the Thorne compound, featured unusual geometric proportions and acoustic principles that created powerful emotional experiences, often leaving participants in a trance-like state, susceptible to Malachi's subtle suggestions. The truly horrifying aspect of the Thorne operation was its sustainability. Unlike other criminal families who relied on overt violence and intimidation, the Thornes created a system where the victims policed themselves. Residents lived in constant, gnawing fear of disappointing their benefactors, competing to demonstrate their loyalty and gratitude. Children informed on their parents, spouses betrayed each other's confidences, and neighbors fought for the privilege of serving the family that had, piece by piece, enslaved them. This psychological architecture reached its peak during what locals called the choosing ceremonies, annual events held during the winter solstice. These elaborate rituals saw residents competing to demonstrate their worthiness through increasingly degrading displays of submission. Winners received additional food, better housing, and protection from the family's displeasure, while losers faced months of subtle but devastating punishment, including social isolation, reduced food rations, and assignment to the most dangerous work details. The fear was so ingrained that even in the dead of winter, residents would willingly walk miles in the snow, hoping to catch a glimpse of Elias Thorne and earn a nod of approval. The physical evidence of the Thorne system remained hidden until a massive flash flood in 1943 damaged parts of their compound, exposing a network of underground chambers. These spaces, connected by tunnels that extended throughout the valley, contained detailed records of every resident's activities, fears, and relationships. File cabinets held thousands of documents, surveillance reports, psychological profiles, and strategic plans for maintaining control over multiple generations. Most disturbing were the medical records describing experiments conducted on residents under the guise of treatment. The Thorns had established themselves as the valley's sole medical authorities, treating everything from broken bones to difficult births. Their records revealed systematic studies of pain tolerance, psychological manipulation techniques, and methods for inducing specific forms of mental illness. They had turned their entire community into a living laboratory for perfecting systems of human control, pushing the boundaries of what was considered possible to inflict upon a human mind without physical coercion. The revelation came through an unexpected visitor. Reverend John Miller, a traveling minister seeking shelter during the same storm that exposed the tunnels. He stumbled upon the hidden records, horrified by what he read, and managed to escape the valley with undeniable evidence of the Thorns' activities. His testimony to state authorities triggered an investigation that found Shadow Creek Valley eerily abandoned, with no trace of the Thorn family or their victims. The official report classified the incident as a mass migration caused by economic hardship. Yet investigators' private notes told a different story. They found evidence of recent habitation, warm food on tables, still burning fires, but no people. Bloodstains covered the floors of several buildings, and personal belongings were scattered, as though people had fled in panic. Most unsettling was the discovery of a mass grave containing remains that carbon dating later revealed to be centuries old, despite being buried in clothing from the 1940s. It was as if the valley had swallowed its inhabitants whole, leaving behind only the ghosts of a manufactured past-modern researchers attempting to verify these accounts, including myself, face unusual obstacles. Shadow Creek Valley appears on historical maps, but cannot be located using contemporary GPS systems. Satellite imagery shows nothing but unbroken forest where the settlement supposedly existed. County records contain detailed information about the Thorn family's activities, but list them as occurring in a location that current geography cannot accommodate, as if the land itself had rewritten its own history. The few elderly residents of surrounding areas who claim knowledge of Shadow Creek Valley provide contradictory accounts. Some describe it as a prosperous community that mysteriously vanished overnight. Others insist it was always a cursed place that drove people mad with isolation and fear. A handful of individuals claiming to be descendants of Valley families occasionally surface in regional genealogical databases, but attempts to interview them inevitably result in their disappearance before meetings can be arranged. This is where my own investigation took a chilling turn, where the line between historical research and personal dread began to blur. I found a recurring symbol in the Thorns' meticulous records, a stylized coiled serpent, often with 7 eyes. It wasn't a symbol I recognized from any Appalachian folklore or regional occult practices. Yet in my family's own history, in my great-grandmother's old Bible, tucked away between the pages, I found a faded photograph. It was of her, as a young girl, standing proudly in front of a schoolhouse. And carved into the wooden doorframe, almost imperceptibly, was that same coiled serpent, with its 7 unsettling eyes. My family, the Hayes, had roots in eastern Tennessee, just a few hollows over from where Shadow Creek Valley was supposed to be. I started digging into my own lineage with a new, horrifying urgency. The more I searched, the more coincidences I found. My great-grandmother's journal, kept hidden her entire life, spoke of the teachers and the great understanding. She described peculiar lessons learned as a child, abilities she could never explain, knowing distant conversations, predicting rainfall with uncanny accuracy, and a profound, unsettling sense of peace whenever she was alone in the deep woods. She mentioned the whispers, a constant presence that guided her decisions, always for the benefit of the collective. And then I found it, a single, undated entry near the end of her life. They did not disappear, they simply ascended. The lesson is complete, we are ready. The chilling twist, the one that makes my blood run cold even now, is this: the Thorn family didn't collapse or vanish. They transcended. Their elaborate system of control, their manipulation of human minds and environments, their experiments in pain tolerance and psychological conditioning. It wasn't about power in the conventional sense. It was a centuries-long, multi-generational project of forced evolution. They had cultivated an entire community, turning its members into something else, something that could shed physical form or move beyond the linear constraints of our reality once their curriculum was complete. The mass grave of centuries-old remains in 1940s clothing. Those weren't victims. They were the discarded husks of those who hadn't ascended correctly, or perhaps the initial failed experiments. The monitoring stations that federal authorities supposedly maintain to this day, disguised as weather facilities. They aren't watching for the thorns to return. They are watching for the lingering effects, for the graduates of the Thorn program who are still out there, subtly influencing the world, preparing it for the next phase. And the reason I found those fragments, those suppressed documents, those faint, almost undetectable traces, because I was meant to. Because my family, the Hayes, was one of the adopted bloodlines meticulously conditioned through generations. My very drive to uncover their secrets, my obsessive pursuit of the truth, was a programmed response. I am not an investigator, I am a tool. What remains certain is that the Thorn family developed and implemented a system of control so comprehensive and effective that it not only erased itself from historical record, but reshaped the very nature of human existence in its isolated domain. Their legacy serves as a reminder that in the deepest hollows of Appalachia, human nature's darkest impulses could flourish unchecked, creating pockets of horror that challenged the very concept of civilization, or perhaps redefined it entirely. The documentation suggests that the Thorns understood something profound about the psychology of isolated communities, that people will surrender their freedom gradually in exchange for the illusion of security, and that the most effective prison is one where the inmates believe they are free. In Shadow Creek Valley, they created a perfect model of this principle. A community so thoroughly controlled that its members never realized they were prisoners until the very moment their captors decided they were no longer needed, or more chillingly, until they were transformed into something else entirely. And I am left with the terrifying realization that perhaps I was always meant to find this story, to tell this story, to continue their work in ways I may never fully understand. What do you think is the most terrifying part of the Thorn family's legacy? Let me know in the comments.